I thought I would walk through a little bit of trying to make sense of some of the big innovations that are going on out there. What I actually do is spend my time in my consulting with these very big companies, because one of the biggest problem I believe we have in the United States right now is we do not have enough growth. And we don't have enough growth quite often because people have defined their businesses way too narrowly. And so they're growing the bottom line and they're not growing the top line. And if we could get the top line growing, it fixes a lot of things. If we could get the sales growing, it fixes a lot of things. That's what creates the jobs, as opposed to the bottom line stuff. And so I've looked at, for a lot of years, at the question of how do you create growth. When I was at Procter & Gamble, the problem was with you're an $80 billion company and you wanted to grow 5%, the math is a killer. The amount of growth that you need is enormous when you're a big company. And so with a very large research budget, we could actually do things and put some money aside and create some new businesses that create some growth. And so that's what got me started in looking about new business development. I'm not going to actually talk about the title up there, but this is because the problem is I wrote a book a couple years ago with a futurist. Bob Johansen is my co-author, or I should say I'm his co-author, since this was his 9th book and my first. And the problem is people were not embracing disruptions. They see them and then they're too scared by them and they do nothing with them, and then they get run over by them. And so the challenge is if something is very different from the past, what you'll actually have to do is you'll have to partner with somebody to do it. And quite often those partners can be very small companies. They could be the startups. And so instead of getting run over by that business or in having those businesses fail, you should try to figure out who should be working together to create the future. And so that was the premise of the book, is to find a problem that you wanted to solve that you can't solve by yourself, rather than continuing to try to solve it because we've got great people, we can just work harder. So let's find different ways to do it. The good news is you don't actually have to worry about finding things because they're already out there. You know, this is a quote from William Gibson. I can't know if you can read it back there, but he's a cyberpunk novelist, but he's out in the Bay Area and in the innovation world. And the future's already here. It's just not equally distributed. And so what we can do is we can look into the future of things that are emerging, and we can ask ourselves, wow, if that happens, how are we going to make money on it? What could we do with it? Let's not ignore it. Let's not pretend it doesn't exist. Let's embrace it and figure out what could we do. This is from one of the founders of Google. And it's just this realization that the reason you miss the future is because it just looks like, I don't know, that's so different, I don't know I should spend my time there. And so we see it and we somehow end up convincing ourselves, we dismiss it. This is the last picture I have, and so Facebook is obviously huge, but they took over the Sun Microsystems campus after Sun Microsystems got bought by Oracle. And they put their sign out on the front, and everybody would stop their car. This is a very busy road. I don't know how many of you have been there, but people pull their car off to the side because they want to go stand next to the like sign, and they want to take their picture next to it. Okay, it's a perfect selfie to post on Facebook. Okay, and so they do that at some personal risk, but they never look around the back. And the back of that sign, which has now been replaced by a new sign, okay, bigger because Facebook's bigger, but the original one was not, for a long time, was not changed. And that's because people in the valley are paranoid. This is the old site of what was once a big company, and someday it's going to be the old site of what was Facebook. And so they're paranoid, and so that keeps them moving and saying, I got to do something with it. The challenge in other parts of the country, not just here, but even on the East Coast in a place like Boston, okay, or whatever, which is quite innovative, is that they pause. And one of the strengths of Silicon Valley is you make an assumption that there's something you can do with it, and you ask, what could I do? And then you try to do something, and if it works, you do more of it. If not, in most other places, they try to figure out, should I do something? And they waste years figuring out, should they do something? And so one of the inherent strengths of the Valley is actually, let's just try something together, and see what we could do. And so here's the factoid that gets to how people miss things, is that there was a work done by this guy, Dick Foster, Richard N. Foster, if you're going to Google him, is because there is a Dick Foster who's an actor. He created Creative Destruction, and he was actually Clay Christensen, the Innovator Dilemma guy's professor. Okay, and so when I've known Clay for a number of years, and so I asked him, who taught you? So I could try to find, going back in time, what's the real roots of this research. And a piece of research was done that was the foundation of Creative Destruction, the book, that looked at the S&P 100 and asked what happened to all these people when the S&P 100 was formed now 85 years ago. What happened to them? Only 2 companies had beat the S&P at the time that this was written, and almost all of them were gone. Those 2 companies were GE and Procter & Gamble, and both of them are now under the S&P 100. And so nobody is beating the S&P 100 any longer. Okay, but at that time, 2 of them. And so there's a famous thing by Ted Levitt that asked the question in 1960, what business are you in? And he said, you're not in the train business, you're in the transportation business. So you've got to define your business more broadly. Actually, the problem is sitting in 1960, what he really missed was it's trains, transportation, and communication, because the thing that was about ready to explode in 1960 was communications. And these 3 businesses are highly related. And so what happens is the S&P looks at innovation from the standpoint of keeping the operating companies, keeping the companies that obsolete the ones who get behind, and then it also accepts new businesses that create things. So there was no Microsoft, in the beginning of the S&P. And so there's these 3 things that are going on. And so the problem is most companies spend their time focusing so much on becoming better at operations that they get obsoleted or they miss the business they could have gotten into. Part of that is just, by the way, they have different rules. And so nobody's asking Amazon for the same demand on profitability that they're asking General Electric. And so the market does have different rules for different kinds of businesses. Well, you can play all of those. And so this is the model that I want to show you is that when I spend my time with large companies and I ask them the question of what 3 industries are you in, and give them this model. Wherever you make your money, that's your trains. If what we could do is remove the rails and still be in that business, that's transportation. And then the last one is a little bit more complicated, but the reason people miss it is because communication, the third one is an experience economy. When Sally goes from New York to Chicago on a train, when she's in Chicago, she talks to her sister. And she can only travel, regardless of how fast the train is, she can only travel to Chicago a few times a year because she has to have vacation days and all these kinds of things. And so what happens is the third column is a high-frequency business model that is the experience of using your product or service. And so now, why is it part of your business? Because it's your experience, but there is no communication business if you can't string the wires. How are you going to string the wires? Over the literal right-of-way of the tracks. And so rather than letting them string the wires and using the wires to be able to take better care of the trains and know where they are at all times, you can actually just sell communication. But you're not going to be able to do that by yourself because all 3 of these things are there, but the problem is the business model is so different that you have to partner to do that. And so if you look at where the big innovations are occurring that disrupt industries and cause industries to disappear, they're in the obsolescence column, but they're also in this last column. In the obsolescence, if you know what you're looking for, you can buy them when they're young. And if you know what your experience is and the business model is different, you can partner with people who know how to make money that way. And they could reuse your assets to make money. So this is the basic model. I want to move on from it because I'm not going to do that because the issue, I'm going to show you growth stories that work for other companies. And so when I sit down and talk to people who are starting new businesses, I ask you, what's your story? Tell me your story of your business. All existing companies have a founder's story. The problem is most existing companies do not have a growth story in addition to their founder story. They're just telling the same story over and over again. But if you're starting a business, I need to know from you what's your growth story. So I want to show you some of the growth stories of companies that you're very aware of that are out there but have never thought of their businesses this way, I'm sure. And then I want to switch to talking about how you craft your own growth story, and because you need to do that. So here's Apple. Okay, and so this is, I'm going to show you a series of slides. Trains, transportation, communication. They start out as a PC business, and then everybody says, well, why would they get in the phones business, all these other kinds of things? Because what they realize is you want to do those tasks at your desk, but anywhere. That's a literal trains to transportation. So every time they put something out, they put on an iPad, and people say, is that iPad as good as a phone, or is that iPad as good as a PC? The answer is no, they do not care. It is not replacing the PC. The guy who, one of the guys, the CEO of IDEO, Tim Brown, is a friend of mine. And when we talked about this, he said, Karl, you know the reason people miss the future is because they love their trains too much. And so whenever you bring them a new idea, they compare it to their train, to their core business. And it's not as beautiful, okay, as their core business. And so they try to make it the same thing. So what Apple's actually been doing is just been saying, we're going to make you able to do whatever you want to do, wherever you want to do it. And they've just been steadily introducing new things to be able to do that. But the reason they're almost worth $1 trillion is because of the last column, which is they realize that you're the one who has the things you're trying to get done. And if we could enable you to do that, they take a 30% charge of anything that goes through the App Store, which is the same cost of taking it through Walmart. That's the markup in a distribution channel. And so they can go and say, since 500 million people have iPhones in their pockets, when you create the App Store, you create a distribution mechanism for people to create their own new companies, and then I just take 30% for distribution. How much does it cost me to take that next app and distribute it? 0. Okay, and so as a result, it's an extremely profitable company. And so they now also make just about all the computers that are out in the world. They make all the computers that make any money, okay, whatever, but you know, they become dominant in the computer market, but that's not their market. Their market is the phones and the apps. And so they're in all three businesses, and they've managed to be able to do that. So everybody says, oh, they're a design company and everything. That's really missing the whole point. They have decided that they're going to enable you to do whatever you want to do, wherever you want to do it. And so they make that super simple to do. So that's their business. By the way, everybody's misinterpreting their new product. The new product, the X, which is the 10, the iPhone X, which is iPhone 10 for its 10th anniversary. I'm going to get one, and because there's a little notch in the top that people have been saying is ugly, and they're talking about pixels and everything. They're talking about the old world. Apple, when it introduces something, is doing something in the new world. They don't care about the old world. That thing at the top, on the left, is Microsoft Connect unit. It's this long. That thing at the top of the notch is a Microsoft Connect unit, now 3.5 centimeters, 1.5 inches, 3.5 centimeters long. So it has an augmented reality device in the top, and they're talking about facial recognition and things like that. No, they just made it possible to do live augmented reality in your hand everywhere in the world. They just don't have it in distribution yet. And so augmented reality, which has been a desire for a very long time, is about ready to completely scale. And so everybody's talking about pixels. That's because they're always talking about the old world. It's not a better phone. The intention with 10 was to rethink the type of change they did 10 years ago when they introduced the phone. Is it going to work or not? I don't know, but don't misinterpret it. IBM has been, the reason they're around is because they've always been in hardware, software, and services. Used to sell machines and then used to service the machines, do software for the machines, and then made their money on service. They spent $1.5 billion to get rid of the hardware because it's no longer profitable, and now they do software services, and they talk about Watson, which is, the Watson model's not working very well for them because they want to pay you almost nothing for your data, and the value is in your data. So they haven't sorted that one out yet, but they're trying to take your data and structure it to be able to solve new problems and make money off of solving new problems that couldn't have been solved without AI. And so that's what Watson is. Watson is nothing special really in the AI world, but it is their entry into recognition that they needed to do a third market. So here's Starbucks. The reason Starbucks makes money is because they reinvented coffee as a milkshake. And if you can, and milkshakes are much preferred over coffee, and the margin of selling milk at the price of coffee is a good thing. Okay, and then now what they're trying to do is they want to be the third place because they own the morning ritual, and that's one of the places, but work is moving away from the office. In Silicon Valley, I tell you, you can go visit Google and their campuses and everything. You need to go to the coffee shops because that's where the work's done. It's not done in the offices. And so they're trying to be the third place. If you're not home or office, you're at Starbucks. And so they're trying to get more and more of your time in Starbucks. And so why do they have free Wi-Fi and everything else like that? Because that's how they're planning to make the business. They already own that real estate, and if nobody's in it, they make no money. And so they take their real estate and they let you do your businesses in there. I'm about ready to do an on-demand healthcare company, and we're counting on a lot of people choosing to do that work in Starbucks, and other coffee shops, because we don't need them to go to a hospital for it. So Facebook paid a fortune for WhatsApp, and that's because they missed the platform change. If they had been Microsoft, they would have argued, we'll make one, it'll be fabulous, you'll love it, and they would have missed it. And so instead, they spent $5 billion to buy that platform that was only 18 months old, but was scaling like crazy. And so they missed the platform, so they bought it. And so you must build your market share in the first one, but you buy the second one, and then you partner for the rest of them. And so they've been trying to do, they're in shareable moments, and so they're trying to create more shareable moments. They bought Instagram because people are sharing with pictures, not words, and then they want to do video, and they're trying to figure out how to get into the video world with investments in VR, virtual reality. I belong to the TED conference. Used to be we'd go to conferences, I still do. Then they realized the web was there and they embraced that. This is then what happens is everybody is so aware of TED and they'd like to give a TED speech, and so what they created was TEDx, the ability to have TED conferences anywhere. That creates enormous amounts of content, and that's what the web needs. The web needs content because it consumes it. And so they've got you making content for them for free, and then if any of it's any good, they will post it online and boost it or invite you to the TED conference. If it's bad, they just let it dissolve into the background. And so they're making money 3 different ways. So these New York Times, the last one here is, they miss digital, but they're doing the best of it. Now what's happened is people are tired of digital, and so the New York Times is known for cooking. So if you lived in Manhattan, rather than getting these generic ideas of we can prepackage foods for you in the like Blue Apron, you can have New York Times meals at home. And so they take something they're known for, an expertise in cooking, and it's much better to throw a dinner party that is a New York Times recipe than it is to get pre-cut pieces of salmon. And so they're trying to get back into the real world. So Amazon is the last one of these examples that I had here that's out there. Everybody is competing with Amazon. No matter what business you're in, Amazon is your competitor. They started with books, and then they literally did everything by anyone. This was the big break. They started being a logistics company by saying, we'll do the transactions on anything. It doesn't have to be stuff we sell. And so, fulfilled by Amazon or third-party businesses are something that they grew. But that's not where they are now. Now they're at this. They'll do your logistics for any business. They do your back room, and now they're trying to do your front office too. They're trying to, because they know more about business intelligence about your customers than you do, and so they're trying to do the front office and the back office. And this is what I'm saying. They're competing with everybody out there right now. They also then bought Whole Foods because why? You can't do fresh food without local credibility, and so Whole Foods is the best real estate deal you could have done in the world. It has the prime real estate in every city across the US, and so that gives them a footprint that is highly desirable. So this is just the whole 3 business thing. Hallmark was in the trains business of cards. Hallmark was too busy making cards to notice that Instagram is basically what people are giving, okay? And so they missed that one. And so I warn people, don't miss that. The last one here that I have as an example of this is Marriott Airbnb. Marriott was in the service business. They thought they had to own the hotel. Simply not true. They're in the hospitality business, and they could have done Airbnb. I listed their valuations down there. Airbnb's valuation is $30 billion. It's the same size as Marriott now. I used to, when I first did this slide, I used to have Hilton up there. But Hilton divided itself up into multiple companies, and Hilton is now worth only $9 billion. And so it's in the process of collapsing its valuation. And so someday what I keep saying is Airbnb is going to buy Hilton because they still know how to do customer service, but it'll be Airbnb buying Hilton, not Hilton buying Airbnb, because they missed it. Last couple of words on this, and I'd love to have a discussion about this, kind of thing, and we can move on to the storytelling stuff, is the auto industry is really key to this part of the country, and there isn't a bigger industry being disrupted right now than the auto industry. It's going to take a lot of years, but there are three, this story hasn't played out, and so I just want to say there's three opportunities in the auto industry, but there are big players dealing with it. It used to be that we had to have a car that was fast, and we had to have entertainment systems that were good, and it had to have great handling. Everybody is disrupting all three of those, okay? And so, so what happens is, in torque, when Formula E was created, that was the end of the internal combustion engine. When we decided that racing was going to make faster cars at the fastest end of racing using the sheer torque that comes from wrapping coils rather than machining parts, okay, whatever. It's a really big, decision. And then iPhones, we love our phone more than our car. We used to love our car more than our phone, okay? And one day we won't care so much about driving. And so this is what, I love this quote because there's a famous quote that I cannot say is really true because I can't find that it really happened, but there's a story that when cars were young, they asked Daimler how big did he think the car market was going to get, how many cars would be sold, and he said, it will not grow very large because there will not be enough chauffeurs. Okay, and so he was projecting his view of the world. The problem is I don't know that I can't find the location, and so I'll just report that he is said to have said that. I don't know that it's true, but this is true. The head of Daimler is very concerned, and he said, I don't want to be the Foxconn of the auto industry, and so I don't want to be the people who are making the things and Apple's making the money. And, but he's well on the way to becoming the Foxconn of automobiles, because right now on the torque front, Tesla, beats all these things, and it's forced Porsche to come out with their e-car program. And second, when you wanted to argue that, this was, people who played with phones weren't real car lovers, when Apple got Ferrari to sign up, that's the beginning of the end, okay, of that one, because there is no compromise in choosing to have a Ferrari. I've only driven one once, and it was a scary, scary experience. I am not qualified to be driving a Ferrari. And, but basically, you can't argue, real car people don't like, this stuff. It's like real car people have Apple Play in their car, have Apple CarPlay. And this one, very near to you, and I just saw a piece of a John Deere tractor downstairs when we were meeting. By the way, the largest, self-driving car company is John Deere, okay? And just so we're pretending that just because the tractors aren't on the road yet, this isn't happening, and I live in the world where I see the Google cars all the time, and I've kind of joked, when there's a autonomous car parked at the Safeway parking lot, I'm trying to figure out, do they eat? Because supposedly it doesn't take a driver, but it's parked there. And so, but anyway, you see them all the time. But yes, they're going to get on the roads. Yes, they're going to get on trucking first. Yes, this is going to take 20 years. But honestly, self-driving is happening. And so, what I'd say is we're on a world where driving is going to be a distraction, which will save lives, because right now we've got distracted drivers, but it's going to switch the other way where driving will be considered a distraction. It'll be a small percentage of what you do. And the last industry, there are two other industries that are disrupted by that, because there is no reason why they're going to replace chauffeurs or you driving. Suddenly you can make objects move that wouldn't have, instead of people moving in cars. And so what you should see is the last mile problem being solved. And a lot of people are working on how do you make something that would never have a human being in it. And so it could sit there idle for hours and then go. I mean, it doesn't have to operate like a car. And so people are thinking about how to do delivery. I don't think that the drone thing's going to happen very big, because the skies are very complicated and it costs a lot of money to raise things versus just to send them on the ground. The last thing is it's going to kill the insurance industry, because once you can price it through an aggregate model of, then you should buy your insurance when you buy the car, or you price it into the price of the ride. You shouldn't have to buy separate insurance, because the risk will be normalized. And so the insurance industry is going to be changed by this. The reason I show you all of those slides is you're in this area and this stuff hasn't happened yet. And so if you're starting companies, I just want you to think these are rich areas for working in, and they're in your area. The last one is Internet of Things. Things are getting smart. I started working with the MIT Media Lab in 1996. And so it's been 21 years now since we called them Things That Think. And the idea of putting intelligence into everyday objects. There are three markets there: making smart things work together, and then managing the upper level of that. Apple's aiming for the upper level. Nest is in the mid-level. GE's selling smart light bulbs. Okay. You could invest in all three of those companies, okay, whatever, but I would invest at the highest level possible, because that's where the money will be. So these are just opportunities that I'm seeing in Silicon Valley that I thought might be relevant here, but I wanted to just frame this for you, because the real question is if we're going to talk about companies that you want to build, if you're going to spend your time on it, if there's a chance you could tell me the story of a company that's going to change the world, that one's really worth your time. And so let me stop first there, and we can take any questions on any of this stuff. And then I just want to talk about, so how do you do what I'm going to call the elevator pitch? How do you tell the story of a company that's very young? Because I see a lot of pitches, and I give a lot of pitches too. So, questions on this? Yeah.
A couple of the sort of growth cases you mentioned.
I don't know that they're going to be able to hear you very easily, and so either I can repeat it or you can be very loud.
Okay. A couple of the growth cases you mentioned.
Yeah.
Tesla, Airbnb, and then sort of getting into Google's autonomous cars, Uber, that sort of thing in the transportation industry. Right now, they're all sort of, let's say, facing regulatory challenges or facing regulatory. Should these be more regulated? Should these be less regulated? I think particularly with Tesla, because they're not facing regulatory challenges so much as they're facing sort of like, they're having issues with the Model 3 rollout, there's finish issues, sort of like Chrysler has already solved. Chrysler is going to make a car. How do you see sort of like those?
So there's two questions there, okay, is in new industries they're taking on regulatory issues, and how do I think about that? And the second one is fit and finish and things like that are the basic requirements of the current industry, are things that other people who are already in can do better. How do they manage that? How do they manage sort of like the problems that other industries either already deal with or have already solved? So a couple of things. So first of all, I was also the head of RX and OTC drugs for Procter & Gamble and did new medical devices, and I currently do most of my startups in the healthcare space today. Regulators exist to regulate. Okay, so I just want to say that. And as a result, you have to just accept that, and then you ask yourself, do I understand what they're really trying to do, and could I possibly help them achieve what they're going to do, so that we are really not fighting each other, but I'm ahead of the regulatory changes. In other words, and so you can develop something, and you could actually direct the regulatory changes. In some cases, this is why there's a whole bunch of countries out in the world, and so the regulations are different in other countries, and so sometimes it's easier to start in country X than country Y. But the market, to be very clear, is in the United States, okay? And so if you can't master the United States market, you will not get money, okay? Because 1/3 of the money in the United States is here, and to blow off 1/3 of the money is crazy. And the second amount of the money is in the rest of the top, developed countries, and the last of it is in the rest of the world. And that's a distribution problem. So there are 3 different kinds of problems. And making money in Europe is not easy because Europe is not really one country. It's really hard to scale. And so, you pretty much have to take on the US regulatory environment no matter what. But maybe you could make money easily first in another country to have some cash flow. And so what I can tell people, don't embrace the regulatory environment. Don't ignore it. And so the people that are doing Impossible Meat right now, where they're using yeast in order to create a meat substitute, I've met with them and I said, I was involved peripherally with Olestra, and what you really want to do is, which was sucrose polyester, an oil substitute. And the problem was, we wanted to do French fries and they want to do hamburgers because these are the big calorie items in the population. The problem is the FDA's point of view was, there are too many French fries sold for us to put experimental foods on French fries. And so I said, if you're taking on a hamburger, why is the FDA not going to, tell you there are too many hamburgers, right? And so what I would encourage them to do is sit down with the FDA and have the discussion about their futures so that they could explain their issues, because then innovation's challenge is to address the issues. And if you choose to ignore the issues, you're not actually innovating, okay? Because it's never going to scale unless you have a strategy for the issues. So some of the people like Travis Kalanick at Uber, who is a complete and total, yes, is, he takes on the world, okay, but he's just a jerk, okay, whatever. And so, and now it finally caught up with him, so you can't ignore it. You should use it as a source for innovation. Now, the second thing is, I don't worry about fit and finish because you have to have a proposal that is exciting, I'm going to talk about solving a pain. If I kill the pain and you were having that pain and you're really interested, then you'll accept other trade-offs. And so the first car they put out was the Tesla Lotus that they rebuilt with just the engine in it. And I actually asked a friend who, the first 100 of those were all sold in Silicon Valley to people who were investors, and I wasn't one of those people, but I knew some of them that were, and so I asked, what's it like? Because I had the Duracell battery business, and I thought it'd be very cool. I could get Duracell as a license plate on the back of a electric car, and I should have one. And the guy who has lots of money, billions, okay, whatever, he said to me, he said, I asked him, do you have one? And he said, I decided not to get one, but I drove it. And I said, how should I think about it? And he said, it's an excellent 7th automobile. Okay? In other words, it wasn't ready. He said the fit and finish and everything isn't there, but they're planning this S model, and so they used that one to sort out the problems and did a very limited placement of them to maximize learning. So Elon Musk's objective is rapid learning. And then if I ask you how many Teslas do they sell, 25,000. Well, 25,000 is nothing, right? Now they're selling more, but 25,000 a year is nothing. And so you keep your scale small and you can build the market, and then when you solve the problems, you do it. Now people are picking them on, well, they handmade the first 3s. Anybody who knows Elon Musk knows those must have been handmade, right? Because Elon Musk didn't have the factory up and running yet. And so he's a great salesman, if you will, but he's also known for always delivering late. So really, people aren't expecting. I know people have ordered a 3 and they're expecting it before they die, but not on a schedule. So anyway, just some other questions, maybe? Yeah.
So if education is still in the train stage,
yeah.
What do you speculate for the transportation and communication?
So I think it's leaving the train stage. We're having a discussion around that. I don't have an answer, but I've thought about it. And so I actually had a company to do simulation of patients. It's called medical excellence. And so the problem is, by the time a doctor graduates, they really haven't seen very many patients. And so if what we could do is offer simulated patients, we could allow you to hone your skills in differential diagnosis. not the practice of medicine, the practice of figuring out what's wrong with you, right? And that piece of it. So we could simulate it, and I thought, and so what we did is we put all that we arranged to have thousands of cases available, and then we could host them with a virtual presence of a virtual patient using DARPA technology to simulate the patient. And what you could do is you could have students then see many, many patients, because somebody would present and you could do the whole interview process and order tests, and we'd give you fake results or real results or whatever to do this. The problem with that market was there's only 1 million doctors, and there just aren't that many med students. And so my issue wasn't that we couldn't do it, we couldn't figure out how to make money on doing it, because I couldn't invest in the company and get a return that was high enough, because the fundamental problem in the education market was too small. That particular, the medical education market, was too small for me to make money on that particular business, but it's completely possible. Where I'm going with that is that I actually think that a tremendous amount is possible to apply a lot of these technologies. I was just at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health over the weekend, and I heard a report out on some of the stuff that they were doing, because they're the #1 Coursera course. They represent 30% of Coursera's profits, and it's all through their epidemiology stuff. They have had 4 million people take their epidemiology classes. 4 million. Epidemiology is just math, okay, whatever, and so it does it online. And so I think what's happening is there's a lot of experiments that are out there. What my conclusion is I think that the question is, what's the purpose of education, and what's the experience, and then I'd work backwards from there. And so I think what happens is you spend 4 years, I'm going to take undergraduate degree, 4 years in undergraduate degree, and you come out ready to do something else. If you understand what they're coming out to do and what the experiences that you're offering, it doesn't have to be done the old way. That'll pinpoint how you can change the interaction for the use of that 4 years. But I think you come in as a freshman knowing nothing about what you want to do in life or how to do things on your own, and hopefully you come out with some skills and some personal knowledge about yourself and the ability to start off into your first job to doing something where you're going to learn more about yourself and more about yourself. But you've been allowed to discover that direction. And if we understand that, that would be more like the experience piece, and then we can ask ourselves, how do we reinvent education? Because I think Sal Khan is right about there's no more than a 10-minute attention span for learning a new subject, because it gets hard. And so how do we give 10-minute bites, and how do we rethink this to be learning objective-oriented rather than going through teaching stuff, but attaining skills. So medicine is moving from fee for service to pay for performance, and I think education has to move on measuring outcomes. The challenge will be the same. I work in a lot of this area of that transition, and the problem is the CEO of the AMA said that the problem is we don't know how to measure outcomes, because we know the outcome 20 years from now, but we don't know the outcome that you should be seeing 1 year down the road. And so we've got to put the emphasis on determining the outcomes that could be seen in the short term that would correlate with the long term, and then you can do the redesign. The last piece on that is Clay Christensen. When I started my education company on simulation, I called him up and said, I want to, you're there at Harvard Business School, you've been in education, and you talked about medicine and needing to reinvent it. Would you listen to this? And he said, Karl, there are 3 business plans. And I thought, oh, I'm going to fail miserably because I don't know the answer to that. And so then he gave me the answer. Because I said, and he said, well, the first is problem solution. And he said, education is not a problem to be solved. The second one is process. Education is a process. He said, we have no idea what the value of any class is at Harvard Business School, but we know that if you take all of these, you come out the other end and you will have a probability of success that is high. He said, since we don't know the process, the value of the individual components of the process, you as an outsider cannot change it because we don't know what to do. Instead, the third business model is useful modules. Make something that other people can use in their process, And if you make one that's useful, they'll ask you for the next, and a series of useful modules will change the process. And so his advice to me as an educator and an education question was, make very useful things for the students, and then go back and see what they want next and keep making those. And if you can make those useful things for the students, that'll give you the measures you need, and it'll give you the continuous stream, and then you can change the process. So that was his advice when I tried to start an education company. And so, which I did about education. Okay. So yes.
I'll use Hilton Hotels as an example.
Yeah.
Nobody that travels cares if they stay in business or Marriott eclipses them. But for the society at large and the people who want those services, does it matter whether Hilton goes out of business? And most of your discussion has been about how the people who are starting up businesses are going to proceed. But does that matter in a broader sense as long as somebody succeeds and people get what they want?
So is the death or life of Hilton important or not? I'm talking about the hotel industry as a total. So the industry, the reason I picked Hilton and Marriott is because I just took the market leader, and the market leader used to be Hilton. It's not now. Now it's Marriott. And Hilton is, on the decline. What I always tell you is, I didn't say, so if we're doing investment thesis, okay, or whatever, inside a company, on innovation, I tell you spend 80% of your money on improving your trains, 15% of your money on not being obsoleted, and 5% of your money creating new stuff. And so we're always trying to make better of the original ones, because I have a practice which I call be the last one standing. So if an industry is in decline, somebody still has to own what's left. You could be like the couple of railroad companies that are actually left are quite profitable, because they're the ones that are left, and so I don't care about Hilton. What I do believe is there will be large buildings that constitute convention hotels, because if you need to dump 300 people into something for a weekend or something like that, that's a hotel problem. That is not an Airbnb problem. The problem is when I need to go somewhere, I could stay, and it's just me, I could stay closer to where I want to be. So if I were going to New York City, I could stay in an apartment that was right next to the office I wanted to go to, because I could find, and I could get a better value, because when you own the building, I don't have to pay for all of that service stuff where am I going to go to? I'm going to go to a fine restaurant in Manhattan. I don't have to have the restaurant in the hotel. So the convention hotel service will exist. The problem is that treating individuals who are just traveling, that could be done a very different way, and that's the business that's exploding. And the reason it's exploding is because it's using under-leveraged assets. These are often vacation homes, and so where I live in Palo Alto, there's a house that's right across the street from me that's owned by a Chinese family, and they spend 4 weeks in this house, and the rest of the time it's empty. If it were legal in my town to rent out their house, it would be a perfect Airbnb property. They would just be, the economics of that, of filling the house on an empty day, would be fabulous. And so Airbnb took underutilized assets, and that's why the Uber market is working. You've got underutilized heavy assets, cars and houses, and in the case of Uber, people who have enough spare time that they could do the two-way contract, which, by the way, means the regulatory problem is not there, okay, because the two-way contract is between you and me, it's not between the company. And so they crafted a way around the regulatory space so that if I want to make a little money on the side with my car that I already own, boom, I'm in. And so these are just complementary business models that use assets in very different ways. Hilton's problem was they thought they would have to build a new hotel. They don't have to. They have to make rooms available. And so they define their business too narrowly. We're almost out of time, and I want to at least show you a couple of slides of this other thing, on it, which is, because I think this is important to understand, and so I'm going to kind of fly through this thing. The problem is you're going to teach people to prototype their business, and I want to make sure that you understand that ultimately, if you can't, an elevator pitch is the 90-second talk that you give when you're, if somebody says, what's your new business about? You have to be able to answer that question. And sometimes that's the only time you have, and that'll get you the meeting to go get the money, okay, whatever. And so So the problem is people don't understand, you've got lots of demos and all this other kind of stuff, but you actually have to have a compelling story. And the story is what sells Teslas, right? Elon Musk sells Teslas because everybody thinks he's Iron Man, okay, or whatever, you know, and he's going to save the universe and send us to Mars, okay, or whatever. The man is telling a really good story, okay, or whatever, you know, and that gets him billions of dollars of investment. So there's these things which are decks, okay, you know, and don't worry about, Guy Kawasaki's deck online is great, it's a great guide for a deck. The problem is it takes a long time to put together a pitch deck, and ultimately the pitch deck is just a story. And so what happens is the amount of money, the problem is when you start a business, you're on the left is a current business, you know everything and you make very few assumptions. The problem is in a new business, we know very little and we make tons of assumptions. That's why the work process is different, because there are so many assumptions. So the risk level is high. You feel in a current business you have high risk, you have nothing like the risk in a new business. And as a result, we have to spend far less money. That's why we do rapid prototyping and stuff, because we're trying to get rid of assumptions and build knowledge rather than use the knowledge we have. So risk, I'm just saying, is how do you know risk is probability of failure. If I spend $1 million and have a 90% probability of failure, I'm spending a lot of money. If I spend $1 million and have a 90% probability of success, I'm spending a lot less. And so current businesses are more like 90-95% success rates. So that's why they spend tons of money. That's why you do low resolution prototyping, is so you understand that you're managing risk, you're not managing your prototype. So this is a prototype thing that IDEO uses all the time. That thing at the top is a film canister in the middle that shows you how old this is, okay, because that would have been 35 millimeter film. Go look it up on the web, okay, or whatever. These little plastic cans, okay, or whatever. You know, and so the idea is I want to create a new medical device. Well, what happens is we do low resolution prototype. We take whatever we have and we do it, because then what do? We tell the story. And then I went in and I did the surgery and I did this and everything else like that. It's still about the story. And so I want you to make things, but I want you to understand, as people who sometimes love making the thing too much when you make them, is tell me the story about the thing. Because storytelling, then, the elevator pitch is a low resolution prototype of this whole deck, okay? And so what we're looking for is to create those. So if I were to tell you this story, I helped Febreze, and so I'm going to help create Febreze. And so the Febreze, you know, story is very simple. This is just could I get money on this kind of thing? I was in a smoky bar last night. I was not, okay, or whatever, but I was in a smoky bar. And, oh my God, I got this morning. I can smell my jacket across the room. Okay, the problem is this is the only jacket I got, or it's my favorite jacket and I wanted to wear it today because I got a presentation. I'm stuck. Oh no, we've already been there. We've all been there, right? You guys, you want to wear it and it's not ready? Okay, so I spray it with Febreze, okay, and I can wear it. You know, and what happens is you know, I spray it and eliminate it. By the way, we made this stuff called Bounce. It uses cyclodextrin. We take cyclodextrin at 10%. I can dilute it to 2%, put it in an existing bottle, put it out at a 65 margin, stick it on the grocery store shelf next to Downy, and I think we'll be in business. Would you like to invest? And the answer is yes. You should have said yes, okay, whatever, because we sold, it's $1 billion business, so you should have said yes. But the point is that the problem is it's the story that counts to that, which is there was a real problem out there that you could see, and then with that problem, we could kill the problem. And so what happens is, I'm hitting the wrong button, of course, is this is what's missing, okay, is your challenge with a new business is to write a story that has the right elements to the story. And the most important things to the story is this idea that you're going to kill a pain. You cannot make things better and get into a new business. It can't smell a little better, I think I'll get by, okay, or whatever. It has to actually kill the pain. And the problem is you'll say to me, but Karl, there aren't enough smoky jackets in the world. Just go make it go away, okay? Because if we can make it go away, I can use the smoky jacket to get Febreze into your house, and then I can get it out of the closet with a different story, you know. But right now, you must be known for something. All people who start new businesses can fit that are really game-changing. Can answer. People will come. People will be able to say, "We are the people who." You know, so even when we did Magic Eraser, silly little thing, you know, cleaning product, Christmas time, people would come by, because we let out just before the holiday time, because that's when you do launches. People would say, what do you do? And I'd say, because I had a lot of things I did, I'd tell them about the newest product that we'd introduced, Magic Eraser. People grabbed me by my, you know, coat, drugged me somewhere and said, you have to meet this guy, because they loved the product so much because it really solved a problem. And so there is this sense that you'll know that it's compelling because it's not just better. Essentially, people will see the world differently after you did it, and they will want to know who did that. Who did that? You know, Elon Musk. Who did Tesla? Tesla without Elon Musk doesn't work. We are the people who. So the first thing is to be a painkiller, and then it has to happen often enough to be a big business. Only then do we start worrying about if we're going to make money at it. Because until you've killed the pain, I can't price it. You know, so cancer drug, $400,000 for therapy, no problem. If people used to die and don't die, and we used to spend $2 million on them, and now we're going to spend $400,000, it's a deal. Right? You know, and you say, well, $400,000 is a lot of money. $2 million was the foil before that, and people were dying. I can cut the deaths in half and then do it for $400,000. $400,000 is a steal. And so if you can't kill the pain, you can't price it. And so people worry too much about how we're going to make money, you know, or they bring, well, the fit and finish will have to be better. Yeah, I'll get there someday. Okay, whatever. You have to want it because it killed the pain. And then we work on all the rest of the elements of delighting people. And then we ask, before we get big money, do we have an unfair competitive advantage? And that should be in quotes for you people who worry about FTC. The whole idea is why me and why now? Because if everybody could do it, then it's a fabulous idea, but it's not worth me creating a company to do it. So the last check on this is why us, why now? You know, and it's, to my Febreze example, I'm going to run through all of these things to just get to the end of this, just to go back to this thing is, see, my Febreze story has all those elements to it. You know, and so I'm just saying, and it happens in the morning, and so I'm going to put it upstairs. We're going to go after the entire dry cleanables market. We actually went after the air and the carpet and everything else once we got into the business. But there's a huge business that's out there that is as big as the one I'm in. I can move money from the dry cleaning industry into my industry. There is money available. We don't have to invent money, you know, for this stuff. And it dries immediately. It's no staining everything. People are going to love it. And why us? Because we own the laundry aisle. And so guess what? I'm going to shove it on the shelf, and nobody else could shove it on the shelf like I can. You know, and so we can do this. And so these are all the elements. But in the end, we're just trying to tell a great story. You didn't need to see me spray the jacket with Febreze. I just told you a story that you could relate to and said, smell it. If you want to come up afterwards, you'll see you don't smell smoke. And so we can do all the demos before. And so the last thing I wanted to say is two things is this, which is your first one's not going to work. And so don't count on being lucky. People who do startups plan to do many of them. And that keeps them what I call optimists who are skeptics. I believe this will work, but I'm going to check up on why. Because if it's not doing what I said it would do, it's probably not worth my time. And so we ran all these businesses to find one that works, because the math is 7 of the 10 will fail, 2 will break even, and 1 pays for the rest. And so people get too in love with their one idea, and I see them, they're still in a new business, and 3 years later, they're still working on the same new business, and it's not for sale yet. Well, I'm worried, because maybe it's their life's passion, but it doesn't look like a business. So what I always say is, so we are the people who, and so if you guys are thinking about the work you're doing, you want to make sure that you have raised the bar so that you're doing something that is worthwhile, where you would say, it's not kind of better, but we could be known for something. What are we going to be known for? The way to be known for that is to stare at a giant market. Don't worry that it's $1 billion, that you're going to make $1 billion. But if you don't start with a huge market, by the time reality sets in, well, I can't reach all the people outside of Ohio. Well, then you just took the population of the United States and you're only talking to 3% of it or something, right? You know, and so your $1 billion market just got to 3% of $1 billion, right? You know, and so stare at a really big problem in the world, first, and then find a pain that you're sure is there, that you have a reason why you can kill it. Because if you can kill that pain, that will create the market, because then we'll get into talking about the details of, are we too early or too late, to make money at this thing. But start at the level of trying to build your story, and that's why I say, go ahead, change the world. The problem is most startup people have a great deal of passion, but ultimately the ones who make a difference are the ones who feel that if I did this, it would be worth my time. Not this would be just kind of good to do, because you don't get the time back. There's enough money for good ideas, you don't get the time back. And so what I tell people is you got to love these startups you're in, because they're going to have high failure rates, and you got to feel really strong that you want. And the best thing you can do is to say, if I did it, it would make a difference. It doesn't have to change the whole world, but it has to change at least the world you can touch, because otherwise it probably wasn't worth it. But I believe you can change the world, and I believe it is worth it. Otherwise, I wouldn't spend my time talking to you about it, and I wouldn't spend my time trying to do it. So let me stop there. If there are any other questions, I want to make sure it's 1 o'clock, so I knew I'd stop at 1. I don't know that I'm late for things next, but I'm happy to talk to people afterwards or whatever else too. But any other questions, quick questions? Yeah.
What kind of return would someone like you be looking for in that one?
You should ask the guy behind who funds. So it depends on where. It depends on where I invest and what I do. And so I found companies, I support companies, I help other people do things, and so I make money different ways. Here's the problem is that if you put early money in, you're expecting the 10x return, because you got to do the one pays for the rest, and so you're looking for a high return. And so that's the true venture return, is aiming for a 10x, not to getting a 10x, but aiming for a 10x return. And then later on, if you're scaling capital, you're in the private equity business, and so there you're more in the 3x return that you're looking for. But now you're late money, and so there's lower risk because it's already making money, and you're just asking as I always say, great brands, wrong management, wrong cost structure. You're going to just change, you're going to keep the brand, change the management, change the cost structure, and then sell. Well, that's a 3x return. So if something's fairly far along, I'm looking for a 3x return. If I were at Procter & Gamble buying it, once I bought it, all I have to do is beat my market capitalization costs. Okay, whatever. I've got to beat my, return rates, which are really cheap money relative to the venture world. And so and that's why people will buy a 10x, company or a 3x company, because now they only have to return to their shareholders the modest growth of a company that's publicly traded. And so I think the return varies. And so what I watch for is, if you're very early in, I ask you about your time. How much time are you planning to spend? What are you going to measure? How are you going to know? And if I don't hear that it's $1 billion market or something, I say, well, what would it take to be $1 billion? P times Q equals 1 billion. Price that we're going to charge times the quantity. If you're going to charge $10, then tell me, how are we going to sell 100 million? So I can't make 100 million. Just tell me what it would look like to sell 100 million, because then I want to make sure it's your question. How big is the market? If the market is small, then you're going to have to get a low return, which means it's going to be more like a private equity. You're just going to find somebody who's doing it and do it better and buy their company. And but I'm open to making money all different ways. I just think you put a certain amount in to get a certain amount out, and make sure that you're not confusing that risk-return ratio. So, other questions? Yeah.
What are the major barriers to innovation in the healthcare?
Major barriers to innovation in the healthcare world. There are a lot. So I'm involved with a company, Health 2047, that's trying to do fundamental changes in the whole healthcare area. The biggest problem with the healthcare market is the $3 trillion economy in the United States. And so you don't want to get me started on a lot of other crazy things in healthcare, because 10 years of $3 trillion is $30 trillion. And so if we want to make a 10-year change in the healthcare system, we better be talking about tens or hundreds of trillions of dollars, right? None of the small stuff that anybody's been talking about for the last, decade, because it won't make a difference. Okay, whatever. Some are better than others, I'm not arguing that, but in a $3 trillion economy, that's what's unique about the healthcare business. It's so big. so enormous. And so it's hard to make a difference. So what happens is people will they can make $1 billion on something and think they did something, and it's good for them, but it doesn't change the system, right? Because $1 billion out of $3 trillion is nothing. So when I get into a market share that's $30 billion, like a consumer products market, if I make $10 billion on it, if I'm selling $10 billion, I got a 33 share. Okay, so a 33 share of a $3 trillion market is $1 trillion, okay, whatever. And so the problem is it's so big that most people are, I'm an engineer, I said that up front, the scale of the problem must match the scale of the solution, okay? Nobody is working on the scale of the problem, acknowledging the scale of the problem. That is the #1 problem, okay, in healthcare. Which is why I'm taking on prediabetes. There's 86 million people, and I'm going to take them all on who have prediabetes. And ask yourself, how could we get rid of half of it in a decade? Because that's a real game changer. Not how could I help a handful of people in the state of Ohio or something like that, but if there are 86 billion people, 10 years from now, there should be half as many. That's how you would set a real objective, and then you ask yourself what would have to be true. So most of the people in the system are managing assets because there's so many assets in the system. They're not clean sheeting the problem. So there are no Ubers in healthcare yet, and the reason, unicorn valuations, because nobody's taking on a big enough part of the problem, okay? And so what's happening is they're making money on leveraging their assets. They're not actually willing to reinvent the problem. And so this mindset is a real killer in the industry. Now you can argue about the regulatory people and everything. It's not the problem. So I'm working on prediabetes. Why? It's not a disease, okay? And so it's not regulated as a class 1, problem, and so, it's not regulated the same way. And so you can, once you understand the regulations, you can choose what to do. If I can solve prediabetes, wouldn't that solve type 2 diabetes? Yes, because they wouldn't get it, okay? In other words, and so I'm going to solve the problem that leads to the problem that's hard. And so I don't know that I'm going to solve this, but we're going to try. But my point is that they'd say, well, I'm going to make diabetes treatment better. Somebody should do that, but those will be the people who are already treating it, and they're going to do it incrementally. And so if I want to make a game changer, I have to define a game changer. And in healthcare, people just are not defining game changers. They're not taking clean sheets of paper. Instead they're saying, oh, well, you can't sell across state lines. I don't care. Yes, you can sell across state lines. You just can't sell regulated products across state lines. Okay, so they're accepting definitions that are way, way too narrow and not making enough change. Now the second problem is a lot of the science is unknown. And so cancer is not a thing; it's many things. And so nobody has solutions for the neurological disorders, okay? And so that's a basic science problem. And so we need to invest in basic science to create solutions that could then scale. I'm an engineer, I worry about scaling, not basic science. And so healthcare has lots of things that we don't know, so we can't scale them. But then when it comes to scaling them, people are using their current assets and asking how do they make more money by doing that rather than a clean sheet approach. That's my view of the healthcare industry. That's why it's not seeing the innovation. And so, but it's ripe for it. It's overripe for it. And it's going to happen when people decide to change it, not when they worry about regulatory discussions and tax discussions and stuff. That's not going to change it, regardless of what your point of view is on those things. So, anything else? No. He wants me to be done. I'm happy to be done. I'm happy to stay around and chat with other people who want to.
Can we all just